Welcome to the all-new Ford Focus. And as I'm sure you're probably already very aware, this is quite an important car for Ford. Before I do anything else, I'm sorry to have to do this, but you kind of have to on YouTube. Make sure you like this video, comment on it, share it with other people, and subscribe. Subscribing is very, very important. And clicking the little bell icon, because then you'll get a notification when we upload a new video. Like the Fiesta, the Focus is an automotive staple. The first generation Ford Focus was launched in 1998 and it found success more or less immediately. Then the second generation was launched in 2004, the third generation was launched in 2011. The Focus is always one of the best-selling cars in the UK and in other countries across the world as well. It's one of those cars that once you've bought one, when it comes to getting another new car again, you'll probably just buy another Focus. Now this is the fourth generation Focus. If you cast your mind back to April 2018, you'll remember that I went to the world reveal of this new Focus. And it was all very exciting with lots of important people and bright lights and smoke and all that kind of reveal wonderfulness. But what Ford did is they basically just offloaded a load of information because this is such a different car compared to the third generation Focus. There was so much to learn. If you haven't seen that video already, go and watch it because, well, there's a lot of detail in there. Two figures that I remember particularly stuck out in my mind when I came away from that event was the fact that the wheelbase has grown by 53mm, even though the overall size of the car is remarkably similar, and the stiffness, the rigidity of this car has gone up by 20%. Both of those things, in theory, will make this Focus feel like a very different car. This, as the keen-eyed among you might have already spotted, is a Focus ST line. And the ST line is the more sporty version of the standard Focus. You've got Focus ST line, you've got Focus Vignale, Focus Active, and standard Focus. The RS and the ST, the proper hot hatchbacks, will be along sometime in the future, but not just yet. What makes the ST line sporty, I hear you cry? Well, aside from the fact it looks different, every Focus, depending on the trim, whether it's Vignale, ST line, standard Focus or Active, has a different grille. That's one thing you can spot. But also the ST line has a different front bumper, it's got different side skirts, it's got a different rear bumper, it's got a kind of fake diffusory thing, and it's got a rear spoiler as well. The big things that have changed is that the suspension has been dropped by 10mm, and also the springs and dampers have been tuned slightly differently, so it should feel inherently different to the other Focuses in the range. And within the ST line name, there are actually two different trims. There's ST line and ST line X. ST line X has a bit more kit. So for example, you get 18-inch wheels, the biggest wheels you can currently get on a Focus, rather than what this has, which are 17-inch wheels. Now you've got four engines to choose from in the ST line. You've got a 1-litre turbocharged 3-cylinder with 123 brake horsepower, or you've got a 1.5-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder with 148 brake horsepower. If you go for a diesel, there's a 1.5-litre with 118 brake horsepower, or a 2-litre with 148 brake horsepower. If you go for the ST line X, however, there is one more petrol engine to choose from. You can get that 1.5-litre turbo, but with more power. It comes with 180 brake horsepower. So that is the most potent Focus overall you can buy at the moment. An ST line X with a 1.5-litre turbocharged engine with 180 brake horsepower. Now this car has the 1-litre turbocharged 3-cylinder. So it's got 123 brake horsepower, it's got 148 pounds-feet of torque. 0 to 62 miles an hour takes 10 seconds exactly, and the top speed is 124 miles an hour. As for MPG, Ford claim about 57 MPG. Overall, I've been getting high 40s, low 50s on every journey I've done in this car, so not too far off. It's a very, very, very quiet engine. The car insulates the engine incredibly well. And in some ways, I suppose for the majority of people, that's quite nice. But to be honest, you can't really hear it at all. It's just so quiet. As for the way it delivers its power, there is always a little bit of turbo lag, but once you get beyond 2,500 RPM, even all the way to the red line at 6,500, it just stays consistent. It just pulls all the way through the rev range. Yes, it isn't particularly fast, but it's just a very good little engine, even if it is a bit too quiet. The suspension is incredibly competent. It doesn't seem to get flustered by any kind of poor road surface at all. Where in some cars you can be accelerating, if you go over a bump, the traction control just panics, you can feel the whole car wobble and shake. That doesn't happen in this. It just soaks up the bumps really, really well. There's a little bit of roll, that's not a bad thing, and there are also optional dampers. This car does not have those dampers, but like I said, it's very, very comfortable, very competent, and it's remarkably good. And not only is the suspension very good, but as I said earlier, this is the strongest Focus there's ever been. So once you start to push on a little bit, it's just very predictable. You know exactly what it's going to do. It doesn't flop around all over the place. It's just, the best word I can use is competent. It's incredibly competent. In fact, it's more than competent, because once you start to push it a little bit harder, you can feel some adjustability in it. If you lift off the throttle in the middle of a corner, obviously it's not a 205 GTI, but you can feel the back end just start to go a little bit light, to move around a little bit. Yeah, Ford's engineers have worked their magic again. They usually do. Gearboxes, you've got a choice of two. There's an 8-speed automatic or a 6-speed manual. Now, as you can probably tell by the fact my arm keeps moving around in this kind of fashion, this has the 6-speed manual, and it's a very, very good gearbox. Ford's gearboxes are usually quite good. This is no exception. I think testament to the fact that it is so good to use is that my fiancée Alice, who is not a motoring journalist at all, got in the car, started to drive it, and one of the first things she said was, "Oh, the gearbox is nice and smooth, isn't it?" Yes, it is. Can't disagree with that. The only thing I find a little bit odd, perhaps, about the gearbox is that the gear ratios seem to be so long. So when you expect to be in, let's say, 5th gear at 40 miles an hour, you shouldn't really be in 5th gear. It's pulling, what, 1500 RPM maybe? And even actually the gear indicator is telling me to go up to 6th gear, which I think is an absolute joke, because I do not want to be doing, what, yeah, that sounds like a happy engine, doesn't it? I don't want to be doing 1200 RPM. The gear ratios are quite long, and so it tends to be the case with EcoBoost engines. You have to kind of reprogram how you use the gearbox to suit the engine. The brakes, they're quite strong. On this particular car, it's done 2,000 miles, so they're actually very, very sharp, perhaps a little bit too sharp, but that's not really a complaint, is it? That's going to be the case when you've got brand new brakes. What I do like is that the car stays actually quite stable when you brake hard, and the hazard lights are not hypersensitive. In some cars, when you brake hard, not even hard, when you kind of put medium pressure on the brake pedal, the hazards lights just have an absolute fit, but in this, they don't. So when you're out for a nice Sunday afternoon drive and you want to enjoy your new Focus ST line and you start putting a bit more energy into the car, once you start braking hard, accelerating hard, the hazards aren't just doing this all the time. I like that. The steering, well, it is quite light. That can be changed though with a button down here on the center console, because there are drive modes. So you've got normal, eco and sport, and that changes things like the steering and the throttle response. And it is quite light, but still somehow it feels very, very trustworthy. What about the way it looks? Well, it has ruby red paint, which costs £800, but looks very, very nice indeed, and I think the ST line is the Focus that I'd go for if I was going to buy a Focus. It looks really, really smart. The slightly sportier edge to it, I think, is well worth the money. As for the inside, well, it's all very well built. The actual quality is very, very good. And what I like is that compared to the old Focus, the center console has been really tidied up. It's not the button fest that it used to be. However, it's not a particularly interesting design, I don't think. You've got a central screen, you've got the heater controls, you've got some controls for the radio, but still, it's just not that exciting. Again, I hate to bring up Peugeot because I always seem to bring up Peugeot, but if you climb into a 508, the keyboard, the piano-like buttons are really, really cool, and there's nothing that interesting here. It's just a bit normal. Prices for the Focus start at £18,300. That's for the Focus style. If you want an ST line though, you'll need £21,900. And then if you want an ST Line X, that'll be 24,400. This particular car, with all of its options, is £24,175. So what do I think of the new Focus? Well, I like it. I think it delivers in all the key areas that a Focus should deliver in. The gearbox, the steering, the chassis. It all bodes very, very well for the Focus ST and Focus RS. So would you buy the new Focus, or is there some other hatchback that you prefer instead? Let me know in the comments below.